The next time you tear off a strip of toilet paper, you're using a solution so ordinary that it feels almost invisible. Soft paper, indoor plumbing, a quick flush, problem solved. But for most of human history, none of that existed, which means one of the most basic parts of daily life had to be handled very differently, with whatever people could find, carry, wash, or spare. And that makes the real question more interesting than it sounds. Before toilet paper, what did ancient humans actually use? The answer is not one strange object or one universal method. It is a whole history of local improvisation, shaped by climate, landscape, technology, class, and one very practical problem. How do you get clean when paper, pipes, and private bathrooms do not exist? The oldest answer is probably the simplest one. Many early humans likely used what was immediately available in the natural environment. Leaves are the obvious example, and for good reason. They are broad, flexible, free, and easy to replace. But leaves were only one option. Grass, moss, handfuls of soft plant fibers, and even smooth handfuls of snow may all have served the same basic purpose in different climates. If you lived in a forest, the material would not be the same as if you lived on a cold plain, a dry steppe, or a rocky coast. That matters because ancient hygiene was local by necessity. There was no global standard. There was only the landscape around you. In some places, soft moss would have been far kinder than a stiff leaf. In colder regions, snow might work, though probably with exactly the level of comfort you are imagining. Near sandy or arid environments, people may also have used smooth stones, pieces of pottery, or other durable materials that could be rinsed and reused. And that brings us to an important point. Not every cleaning method was disposable. In the modern world, we tend to assume wiping means using something once and throwing it away. But many older societies relied on reusable tools, especially where water for washing or communal sanitation systems existed. The best-known example comes from the Roman world. Public latrines often used a tersorium, usually described as a sponge attached to a stick. After use, it was rinsed, often in salt water or vinegar, which is an impressive reminder that history was not always more romantic than modern plumbing. The Roman example is useful because it is one of the cases where we have clearer written and archaeological evidence, but the underlying logic appears in many cultures. If a material was absorbent, washable, and available, it could become part of daily hygiene. Cloth scraps are another likely candidate in wealthier or more settled societies, especially once textile production became common enough that old fabric could be repurposed. The key question was always the same. Is it soft enough, practical enough, and clean enough to use again or discard? Water, though, may have been even more important than wiping materials themselves. In many parts of the world, washing with water was and still is the main method of cleaning after defecation. This was not some unusual backup plan. It was often the primary system. A hand, a pouring vessel, a stream, or a stored container of water could do the job more effectively than dry wiping alone. In South Asia, parts of the Middle East, and many other regions, water-based cleaning traditions go back deep into history and were reinforced by habit, climate, and religious ideas about purity. So when we ask what ancient humans used before toilet paper, the honest answer is sometimes not paper substitutes at all. Sometimes they used water first, and a plant, cloth, or nothing additional second. That is a very different picture from the modern bathroom, but it may actually have been more hygienically effective in some contexts. The really surprising part is how inventive human societies became once we look beyond the broad category of natural materials. Historical records from different times and places mention sticks, corn cobs in later agricultural societies, animal wool, shells, and ceramic fragments. Not every claim is equally well documented, and some popular lists on the internet repeat dramatic examples without much evidence, so it is worth being careful here. The safest conclusion is not that every strange object on those lists was common. It is that humans repeatedly adapted whatever materials were soft, smooth, washable, or abundant in their environment. China offers one of the earliest known examples of paper being used for hygiene, though not in the modern mass-produced sense. Written references suggest that paper for toileting existed there by the early medieval period, and by later imperial times, it could be produced in large quantities for court use. that does not mean ancient humans everywhere suddenly switched to paper. It means that once paper became cheap enough in one region, a new option entered the story. In much of the world, however, toilet paper remained rare or unavailable until very recently. And social class changed everything. A powerful official, urban household, monk in a literate society, or resident of a city with organized sanitation did not necessarily clean themselves the same way as a rural laborer, a shepherd, or a hunter-gatherer. Access to cloth, water, waste systems, privacy, and specialized tools depended on wealth and infrastructure. Even the place where people relieved themselves mattered. A pit latrine, a riverbank, a chamber pot, and a communal stone toilet each created different practical solutions. There was also a second function hidden inside all of this: health. Cleaning was not just about comfort. It reduced irritation, smell, and the spread of waste. Ancient people did not always understand microbes in modern scientific terms, but they understood consequences. A dirty environment attracted insects, contaminated water, and made daily life worse. So these methods were part of a broader sanitation story that includes latrines, drainage, waste pits, and cultural rules about where human waste should and should not go. In other words, the history of toilet paper is really the history of problem-solving. Humans faced the same biological fact in every era. The tools changed, but the need did not. Leaves in a forest, moss in damp ground, water from a jar, a sponge on a stick in a Roman latrine, reused cloth in a household, early paper in imperial China. None of these were random. They were local answers to the same daily problem. So if you ask what ancient humans used before toilet paper, the most accurate answer is this: whatever their environment, technology, and culture made practical. Usually that meant plant material, water, reusable wiping tools, or cloth. And once you see that, a roll of toilet paper stops looking like a universal human habit. It starts looking like a very recent luxury sitting in a much older story of adaptation, necessity, and people doing their best with whatever was within reach.